I'm going to tell you the 5 words that every unfaithful husband I've ever treated said to me. Not most of them, every single one. In 40 years, across hundreds of cases, in different decades, different social classes, different levels of education, different ages, different reasons for cheating, every man who sat in my chair and admitted to an affair eventually said the same 5 words. And the reason those words matter, the reason I'm telling you about them tonight, is not because they are shocking. It is because they are ordinary. They are so ordinary that you might have heard them in your own living room without recognizing what they meant. The 5 words are, "She just does not understand me." I know. You were expecting something more dramatic, something more confessional, something that would reveal a deep psychological wound or a hidden pathology. But that is the point. That is exactly the point. The most dangerous sentence in a marriage is not, "I do not love you anymore." It is not, "I have been sleeping with someone else." It is this quiet, self-pitying, seemingly harmless complaint that turns the unfaithful person into the victim and the betrayed person into the cause. She does not understand me. 5 words. And inside those 5 words is the entire architecture of how people justify the unjustifiable. Let me explain what I mean, and let me do it by telling you about 5 men, one for each word, who said that sentence to me over the course of my career, and what those words really meant when I pulled them apart. The first man I will tell you about, I will call him Warren. I treated Warren and his wife, I will call her Louise, in 1983. It was early in my career. I was still young enough to believe that most people who came to therapy genuinely wanted to change. Warren was a high school football coach. Big man, loud laugh, the kind of person who fills a room just by walking into it. Louise was a kindergarten teacher, soft-spoken, patient, the kind of woman who always had tissues in her purse and a gentle word for anyone who needed one. Warren had been having an affair with a woman at his gym for about 8 months when Louise found out. She found out because the other woman called their house. That used to happen more than you would think. Before cell phones, before text messages, before the digital infrastructure of modern deception, the other woman sometimes simply picked up the telephone and dialed the home number. It was crude, it was effective, and it left no room for ambiguity. Louise was devastated. Warren was defensive. They came to me. In our 3rd session, I asked Warren why. Not "why did you do it?" because that question is too broad and usually produces rehearsed answers. I asked him something more specific. I asked, what were you telling yourself in the moment before the first time it happened that made it feel acceptable? Warren thought about it for a long time. And then he said, I told myself that Louise just does not understand me. I asked him what Louise did not understand. He said she did not understand his need for excitement. She did not understand that he was more than a husband and a father and a coach. She did not understand the part of him that wanted to feel alive. I asked him if he had ever told Louise any of this. He said no. I asked him why not. He said, because she would not have understood. Do you see the circularity? Louise does not understand me, but I have never told her what she is supposed to understand. The accusation creates the justification, and the justification prevents the conversation that might disprove the accusation. It is a closed loop, a perfect, self-sealing system of rationalization. And Warren was not a sophisticated man. He was not a manipulator by design. He was a football coach who wanted to sleep with a woman at his gym and needed a story that made him feel like something other than what he was. She does not understand me was that story. I will tell you what happened to Warren and Louise, because it matters. Louise sat in that session and listened to Warren say that she did not understand him. And then she did something that I have seen very few people do in my office. She turned to him and said, Warren, you never asked me to understand. You decided I could not, and then you used that decision as permission. Warren had no answer for that, because she was right. He had appointed himself the judge of her capacity and then punished her for a verdict she never had the chance to contest. They stayed together, Warren and Louise. It took 2 years of hard work. But the reason it worked was that Louise's response cracked the loop open. She forced Warren to see that the problem was not her comprehension, it was his silence. The second man I will call Raymond. I saw Raymond in 1991. He was an accountant, meticulous, quiet, the opposite of Warren in almost every way. His wife, I will call her Deborah, was a real estate agent, outgoing, ambitious, the primary earner in the family. Raymond had been having an affair with his assistant for 2 years. It was not passionate, it was not dramatic. It was, by his own description, comfortable. He said his assistant made him feel seen. He said she asked about his day and actually listened to the answer. When Raymond said the words to me, "She just does not understand me," he meant something different from what Warren meant. Warren meant Louise did not understand his appetite for excitement. Raymond meant Deborah did not understand his need to feel important. He felt overshadowed by her career, her confidence, her presence. He felt like an accessory in his own marriage. And rather than telling Deborah that, rather than saying, "I feel small and I need your help," he found someone who made him feel big without requiring him to be vulnerable. That is the second function of those 5 words. They replace vulnerability with blame. It is much easier to say, "She does not understand me," than to say, "I feel inadequate, and I am afraid that if I tell her, she will confirm it." The 5 words protect the man from having to admit what he actually feels, which is almost always some version of fear. Fear of irrelevance, fear of aging, fear of being ordinary, fear of being seen clearly by the person who knows him best. The affair is not a solution to the problem, it is an avoidance of the problem, and those 5 words are the bridge between the avoidance and the action. Raymond and Deborah did not survive, not because Deborah could not forgive, she was willing to try, but because Raymond could not stop comparing. He would come to sessions and describe what his assistant gave him, the attention, the admiration, the feeling of being central, and then describe what Deborah gave him, which was everything else, the stability, the income, the household, the structure, but not that specific quality of being gazed at with uncritical adoration. He wanted to be admired the way his assistant admired him, and he resented Deborah for knowing him too well to offer that. They separated after 14 months of therapy. Raymond married his assistant 2 years later. I heard from a colleague who treated them subsequently that the marriage lasted 3 years. Apparently, once the assistant became the wife, she stopped being the audience and started being the partner, and Raymond found himself right back where he started, feeling unseen by the woman across the breakfast table. The third man I will call Philip. I treated Philip and his wife, I will call her Catherine, in 1997. Philip was a surgeon, brilliant, articulate, and deeply certain of his own importance. Catherine was a stay-at-home mother of 4 who had put her own career on hold to support Philip's. Philip had been having an affair with a colleague for over a year. When Catherine found out, Philip did not apologize. He explained. He told Catherine, and he told me, that the other woman was the only person in his life who truly understood the pressure he was under, the life and death decisions, the hours, the isolation of being the one who has to cut. When Philip said she does not understand me, he meant Catherine did not understand his professional identity. And in a narrow sense, he was right. Catherine had never held a scalpel. She had never lost a patient. She did not know what that was like. But here is what Philip refused to see, and what I spent months trying to help him see. Catherine did not need to understand surgery to understand Philip. She needed Philip to let her in. She needed him to come home and say, "I lost a patient today, and I feel like a failure," instead of coming home and saying, "You would not understand." Every time he said those words, he was not describing Catherine's limitation. He was describing his own. He was the one who could not translate his experience into something shareable. He was the one who could not be vulnerable. And rather than learn how, he found someone who already spoke his language, so he did not have to learn a new one. That is the third function. Those 5 words are a refusal to do the work of intimacy. Real intimacy is not finding someone who already understands you. Real intimacy is the effort of making yourself understood by someone who is different from you. It is hard. It is uncomfortable. It requires the admission that you are not perfectly self-sufficient. And for men like Philip, men who have built their identity on competence and control, that admission feels like a kind of death. So they find someone who requires no translation, and they call it understanding. And they call their wife's inability to read their mind a failure of the marriage. Philip and Catherine divorced. Catherine was remarkably composed about it. She told me in one of our final sessions that she had spent 18 years translating herself for Philip, simplifying her thoughts so they fit his framework, asking about his work in ways that invited him to share, sitting awake at midnight waiting for him to come home so she could ask how his day went. And for 18 years, he walked past her and picked up the phone to call someone who already spoke his language. She said, "Dr. Whitfield, I was not the one who failed at understanding. I was the one who tried every day and was told every day that my trying was not enough. And eventually I believed it. That is what I cannot forgive. Not the affair. The fact that he made me believe I was insufficient." Catherine went back to school at 44. She finished a degree in social work. I heard years later that she was running a support group for women whose marriages had ended due to infidelity. I was not surprised. Catherine was always someone who turned her pain into usefulness. Philip, as far as I know, married his colleague. I do not know if she eventually stopped understanding him too. The fourth man I will call Donald. I treated Donald in 2004. He was a retired police officer, 61 years old, married for 37 years to a woman I will call Shirley. Donald's affair was different from the others. It was not physical. It was emotional. He had developed an intense connection with a woman he met at a grief support group after his partner on the force died in an accident. They talked every day. They shared things Donald said he had never shared with anyone. They held hands once in a parking lot, and Donald told me that moment of contact was more intimate than anything he had experienced in decades. When Donald said the words to me, "She does not understand me," his voice broke. Because for Donald, the words were not a justification. They were a lament. He genuinely believed that Shirley, after 37 years, did not understand the parts of him that carried trauma, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the guilt of surviving when his partner did not. And Shirley, to her credit, had tried. She had asked. She had waited. She had left the door open for decades. But Donald could not walk through it. He could not say the words to the woman who slept beside him every night, because he was afraid that if she saw what was inside him, she would be afraid of him too. Donald's case taught me something that changed how I practice for the rest of my career. It taught me that sometimes those 5 words are true. Sometimes the wife does not understand, not because she is incapable, but because the husband has built such a thorough wall around his pain that understanding is structurally impossible. The wall is not the wife's fault. It is not even the husband's fault exactly. It is the result of years of silence compounding into something impenetrable. And the tragedy is that the affair does not break down the wall. It just builds a window in it that faces the wrong direction. The fifth man I will call Arthur. I saw Arthur in 2012, near the end of my active practice. He was 46, a software engineer, married for 12 years to a woman I will call Megan. Arthur's affair was with a co-worker. It lasted 3 months. He confessed voluntarily, which is rare and which I respected. He came to therapy not to save the marriage, he was not sure it could be saved, but to understand why he had done what he did. That is also rare. Most people come to therapy to be absolved. Arthur came to be examined. In our 5th session, I asked Arthur the same question I had asked Warren 30 years earlier. What were you telling yourself that made it feel acceptable? And Arthur said, I told myself that Megan just does not understand me. Then he paused. And then he said something I had never heard any of the others say. He said, but that is not true, is it? Megan understands me fine. I just did not want to be understood. I wanted to be new. I wanted to be someone who had not made all the mistakes I have made. I wanted to start over with someone who did not know my history. It was not about understanding. It was about escape. I sat with that for a long time, because Arthur had just dismantled in 3 sentences the mythology that every other man had spent months defending. She does not understand me is not really about understanding. It is about escape. It is about the fantasy that somewhere out there is a person who will see you the way you want to be seen, rather than the way you actually are. Your wife sees you actually. She sees the failures and the compromises and the years of ordinary accumulation that make up a real life. The other woman, at least in the beginning, sees the version you curate, the highlight reel, the man you wish you were. And that contrast between being seen truly and being seen selectively is what those 5 words are really about. Arthur and Megan stayed together. It was not easy. Megan was furious, and rightly so, and the fury lasted longer than Arthur expected, because he thought that confession was the same as resolution. It is not. Confession is the beginning. Resolution takes years. But what made Arthur different from Warren and Raymond and Philip and Donald was that Arthur could see himself clearly. He could name the lie for what it was. He could say out loud, "I did not cheat because Megan failed. I cheated because I wanted to be someone else for a while, and that is my failure, not hers." Megan told me in one of their final sessions that it was not the confession that saved the marriage. It was that sentence. She said, "When he stopped blaming me for not understanding him and started admitting that he was the one who ran away, that is when I knew there was something left to save." She does not understand me means I do not want to be understood. I want to be imagined. That is what I learned in 40 years. That is the truth behind the 5 words. They are not a description of the wife. They are a confession by the husband. A confession that he has stopped doing the work of being known by the person who chose to know him. A confession that he would rather be a stranger to someone new than be fully seen by someone familiar. A confession that he has mistaken novelty for connection and secrecy for intimacy, and the thrill of being unknown for the deeper, harder, more valuable experience of being known completely and loved anyway. I want to say one more thing before I go. Not every marriage where those words are spoken ends in an affair, and not every affair involves those words. People are complicated. Marriages are complicated. I've spent my career resisting the urge to simplify human behavior into neat categories, and I'm not going to start now. But I will say this. If you have heard those words from your partner, or if you have said them yourself, it is worth stopping and asking what they really mean. Not the surface meaning, the real one. Because in my experience, the person who says she does not understand me is almost never asking to be understood. They are asking to be excused. And those are very different requests. If this made you think, if it made you uncomfortable in a useful way, then it did what I hoped it would do. I have more stories like this. 40 years of them. Some are harder than this one. Some are stranger. Some will make you question things you thought you knew about love and loyalty and the distance between what people say and what they mean. If you want to hear them, subscribe. I will be here. I have nothing but time and truth, and at my age, I see no reason to waste either one.